welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon and I'm the host of A Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs. And welcome, Phil.
Thanks, Sharon, and welcome back to part 2 of our podcast. Enjoy.
But let's have a look at another book. I open it up, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. In the light of the moon, a little egg lay on a leaf. One Sunday morning, the warm sun came up and pop! Out of the egg came a tiny and very hungry caterpillar. He started to look for some food. Aha! Who's he? How do we find out who's he? What would make sense? Let's go back, and this is where I'm going to explicitly teach to the kids that I need to go back to find out who the author is referring to so that I can understand what's happening. So we go back to the previous sentence. Out of the egg came a tiny and very hungry caterpillar. Aha! That must be who he is. And the illustration helps us to see that too, by the way. We go on. On Monday, he ate through one apple, but he was still hungry. So who's this he? It's the caterpillar. And all the way through the book, knowing that he is the caterpillar, we will be understanding what's happening. Right up to the very next day was Sunday again. The caterpillar ate through one nice green leaf, and after that, he felt much better. So, and here's another type. Right at the end of the book, he built a small house called a cocoon around himself. Ooh, what does himself mean? It means around the person or the thing that's being spoken about. He stayed inside for more than 2 weeks. Then he nibbled a hole in the cocoon, pushed his way out. What's his? What's his referring to? What do you think would make sense? What would it be? Let's look back in the sentence and think about that. So that those cohesive ties within a sentence and across sentences are very important to teach kids about. And I've got a number of books in front of me at the moment, and I could open up almost every one of them and come across those cohesive ties, whether it was fiction or non-fiction. So they occur so frequently that I know that would be a really good thing to teach the kids about. Now, I can do it when I'm reading aloud, and I can do it in shared reading, so that when they come to reading themselves, they will understand what those words mean and who or what they're referring to. And if I don't have sentences with those cohesive ties in them, I need to find texts that do, because they are going to need to use that information in their reading. And again, if I was to do some writing with them as a class, and we actually wrote some sentences, and we might write, the dog ate a bone. The bone was big. What if we said, the dog ate a bone that was big? Here's another type of cohesive tie, those conjunctions that join sentences together. And I want to demonstrate how we would write that by joining sentences together. And in fact, sentence joining is a really good way of helping children to comprehend more complex sentences. Again, here's the writing taking place to help us with comprehension. So I want to do a lot of that with a lot of different kinds of texts. It happens in nursery rhymes even. So as we learn a nursery rhyme, and it might be, I think, let's see, Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does her garden grow? Then we're going to think about who her is. How important is that, hey?
Yep.
Where it occurs so often and so dramatically affects comprehension. So I know that's a good thing for me to teach. And it's one of the things in my list. And it's one of the things that can be referred to as verbal reasoning, because verbal reasoning includes the strategy of inferring. And in fact, you are inferring who those pronouns refer to because of the construction of the sentence or the sentences, what's going on, what we see in the illustrations. The author isn't stopping and saying, oh, her refers to Mary. We are inferring it and working out what those cohesive ties mean in order to understand what we're reading. So I might also then think this goes so well with one of the major comprehension strategies, inferring. I wonder how often the children who are starting to read need to be able to infer in order to understand. Well, let's have a look. Here's another one. This book is Saturday Mornings. Okay, so when do we think this is going to take place, this story? I'm inferring, aren't I? Because that's the title. It starts, I love Saturday mornings. Who's I? There wasn't even a sentence before that to figure it out from. How am I going to know who's I? I love Saturday mornings. My brother washes the car and I often help. Who's I? Who's the my referring to? My brother. Well, it must be the person who's telling the story, and perhaps I need to be very explicit in pointing that out to the kids, because many of the books they start to read expect that the child is going to be working out it's the person telling the story who the text is about, and it'll be I or she or my mother. And we need to know who those pronouns are referring to in order to understand. So I'm inferring. The author doesn't say, the boy loves Saturday mornings. That would be quite different to I love Saturday mornings. And this happens frequently. I love Saturday mornings. What else is going to help me to know who I is? And it's the person telling the story. Where do I go for the information? I have to look at the picture. There's a boy in the picture putting on his socks. He's already got his T-shirt and his jeans on. He's putting on his socks. I love Saturday mornings. I must be the boy. I'm inferring it because of what's in the illustration. My brother washes the car. So whose brother is it? It's the boy in the illustration. It's his brother. And I often help. Now, there's more going on in the illustration, just like in many, many, many early reading material. This boy is helping his brother. He's got the hose and he's pointing it at what he thinks he's pointing at the car. But guess what is going on behind him? The dog is pulling at the hose. The dog, by the way, was in the first picture. It's the boy's dog. He's pulling at the hose, yanking it so the hose face is facing a different direction. And who's it facing? The boy's brother. And by the way, I'm inferring that the other boy in the picture must be his brother. Who else could it be? Because the text says, my brother washes the car. So, and he's got a washer in his hand. But now what's really happening, I'm inferring that this boy really isn't helping. He's pointing the hose at the boy instead of the car. To understand what's going on in this story, I'm doing so much inferring, and the illustrations are helping me over and over again. Be very careful not to be simply saying to your kids, don't use the illustrations. I'm sure you can all think of many books where that is so important. Rosie's Walk. The story is about Rosie, but it doesn't tell in the words everything that's going on in the story, because the other main character is the wolf or the fox. That's not named, so I can't tell you if it's a wolf or a fox. I can only go by the illustrations. Is doing lots of things through the story, and the things that Rosie, who must be the hen, by the way, because otherwise who else could Rosie be? I'm inferring so much about this book in order to understand what's going on. So my main message so far, with everything I've talked about, is think about what the reader is going to need to notice and do in order to understand this book. So what background knowledge do they have? What vocabulary might they need help with? Is the sentence structure simple or complex? Is there inferring to be done? Will we be able to work out who the pronouns are? I'm telling you so many things that you need to teach your kids right from the start of listening and reading in order for them to have comprehension. Well, I've said some long sentences there, Phil.
Yes, right. So
If we
if
were
you
to analyse those, I hope people are getting the main message.
yeah, that's right. So your decoding can be done alongside your comprehending in your teaching and in your student learning. It doesn't.
Not only can be, but must be.
Must be.
Because that's also one of the things that's going to affect the comprehension, isn't it?
Yep.
If the children can't say the words, then they can't do the comprehending. If they can't read the sentence, then it's not like a whole string of words together that they have to work out what it is. And it's important that it's a normal sentence, yes, but they've got to know the relationship between the sounds and the letters, or recognise frequent words, the sight recognition. All of that is really important. If they couldn't do that, and by the way, if they couldn't do it more easily and more easily as time goes on, then the less room, if you like, is left for the comprehending part. So I would need to make sure I'm working equally on the word recognition,
So
the phonological awareness, the decoding, the sight recognition.
Isolating the decoding doesn't really, you're only doing half a job.
Yep. I wouldn't be able to do just one of them and think the children are reading. You know, they have to go hand in hand.
Yep.
They have to happen in an integrated way. And that's why, fortunately, because I read aloud so much, the children are hearing words, hearing the sounds in words. We even know that the phonological awareness includes being able to hear how many syllables in a word, or hearing that two words sound the same, that they rhyme. And then we're going to get on to being able to break the words into sounds. So we have to have some words to start with in order to start hearing sounds in words. And so reading aloud, and in particular shared reading, where I say a word and they see the word and are even by the third reading saying the word, then we've got a phenomenal resource to go back to find out when I see this letter, it's always a D, because this word is D-O-G and I say dog, and this word is D-A-D and I say dad. And I'm already starting to make my own inferences about what letters represent what sounds. Boy, the kids who are not read to, and in particular using shared reading, it would be so abstract. You know, what purpose is there for learning about sound symbol relationships, so that, you know, when I look at words and I see that they're made up of letters, which is an important step, but then I'm noticing that for every letter there is a sound, or sometimes two letters together, representing a sound, like SH being sh, or it's not always sh, by the way, but we can make those associations because we've got shared reading going on that makes it so easy for us to do in conjunction with all of the things I've just been talking about, the sentence structures, the vocabulary, the concepts of print, that I can use that same resource to help teach sound symbol relationships, and for them to have some sort of meaning and understanding. And guess what I want them to also do is I will do some shared writing, and when I'm
Yep.
saying a word, then I'm writing the letter that I hear with the first sound and so on. And then we do it interactively with the kids, showing what they already know about it. And then if they don't get to write it themselves using that information, then we're only doing half the job as well. So everything goes together. Thank goodness, because that's what's making my day doable.
And the writing is actually the child having the ability to demonstrate what they're understanding.
Understanding of all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Because when they start to write, if they haven't been read to a lot, they might think writing is just writing one word. And, again, what we do, if in shared writing we only write one sentence, they can also think writing is only one sentence. So you ask them to write, they'll only write one sentence. So we have to remember that it's what Frank Smith called demonstration, sensitivity and engagement. Whatever we demonstrate is what the children will learn. So, but again, do they happen together? Yes. How do they easily happen together? Because of the fact that we are reading aloud, we are writing in front of them and so forth. And what I choose to read and write will influence all of these aspects of comprehension and of learning word recognition.
Yes.
So that, even if I want the kids to learn about what two words rhyme, as in sound the same, how easy that is to do if you're using nursery rhymes with rhyming words. And, when I read them nursery rhymes and they love them to be read over and over again, I might be building up a whole lot of knowledge about how words sound, but also these pronouns that are coming into it, like Mary's garden. How does her garden grow? So thank goodness I can do all of this work with the same texts, or I'd be having a very long, busy, hard day, wouldn't I? So the more integrated it is, the easier it is.
It is so much so that you can use that same text over and over rather than the model of here's 8 different activities we're going to do in our literacy lesson, and I've got to plan those 8 activities at night time, and then we're going to all split into groups to do them and then rotate around them.
Yeah, even if I don't need them.
Yeah, that's right. So much simpler to have the same text and get so much out of that text.
Exactly. And being aware of what you want to get out of it, what you want to teach, is really the main thing for a teacher, isn't it?
Yep.
Which is why we're providing the podcast and why there are notes to go with it. And, the great thing about a podcast, I love the fact that I can go back to them and listen to them over and over again to understand what they're about, what they're helping me to do as a teacher.
Yep.
But the same, we'll provide an article to go with this and lots of other reading to do, because the teacher knowledge is what we need to build. I know I need to keep building my knowledge in order to be able to be a good teacher and to be a teacher of teachers in particular. I don't want to be sharing ignorance.
Yep.
So unfortunately, that does happen.
It does. Di, should we talk about, we're starting in foundation with our comprehension, then we're going to year 1 and then year 2. How's that going to change?
The change is in the texts.
Okay. Yep.
All of those comprehension strategies and things that help comprehension are going to continue for all of the children's years at school, and they will also improve right throughout life. What changes is the variety and complexity of texts that are being read to you and you are reading as the child.
And I guess the students are becoming more and more proficient with those comprehension strategies if they're doing them each year.
Exactly. And so it's a very good thing in a school for all of the teachers to be learning the same things, of course, that they all have to keep building children's background knowledge. Now, it's interesting. This has become such an important aspect of, or realised it's such an important aspect of comprehension, that what you know about will dramatically affect what you understand about what you read. That there's even a push for fill the day with content knowledge, that's going to be so influential in children understanding what they read that should almost happen all day. And then others are saying, but hang on a minute, we've got to teach comprehension strategies and we have to make sure that they're learning how to use these pronouns in their text. There's a lot more to it than just the content knowledge. So again, it's a common sense balance.
Yep.
But as the grade 1 teacher and grade 2 teacher, I'm aware that even the topics I choose or the school chooses to learn across the grade levels so that the kids don't learn about, community in a foundation and then community again in grade 1 and community again in grade 2. When you think about the wealth of learning there is, like one little boy that his mother was telling me about this morning, he's in grade 1. He knows so much about crocodiles that he was even able to work out how to come up with a sort of mystery bag with some clues so that you would know what's in the mystery bag is a crocodile, right down to the last clue was it's a reptile. Wow, he's got the vocabulary that goes with the topic he knows about as well. So he knows a lot about crocodiles. I've bought him a book about sharks because I can see he's really interested in learning about interesting creatures, animals. So let's go on and learn about something else now. Well, teachers need to do that too. If you look across your school, what's the variety of topics in science and health and history, etc., that the children are going to learn about so that they continually build on their knowledge? How do we make sure across the year levels that the children are reading a variety of texts, fiction and non-fiction, with very different topics and different language structures, so that grows and, they build on what they know. Like you can build on a simple sentence to make a complex sentence. So you want to be doing that. You don't want them in grade 3 to only read one particular series where the author only uses one type of sentence structure and doesn't have any new vocabulary in it. You have to find those authors that have got a range of vocabulary. And, so across the years in a school, that's what changes. It's the texts and the topics.
Yep.
The same strategies need to be taught.
Yep. And then they're developing their expertise in that.
Exactly.
Yep.
And mind you, I find that once I help the children realise what those pronouns are referring to, that I may not need to do that again in grade 1 and grade 2, etc. But you're watching out for that. And you can watch out for that. When you listen to children read, all you have to do is say, well, this was the sentence, who's he? And if they can't tell you, it's, here's a child who needs more of that. So you can really only find out by listening to children read, which means you've got to have children reading every day, even to inform your own teaching. And of course, we know that reading every day, they need volume of reading, practice at reading, lots of reading, different kinds of texts in order for any of these things to happen.
So I hear some high school teachers say that we've got children that are coming into high school that can read, but they don't necessarily want to read anymore. Is that because they haven't had that dual decoding and comprehension focus throughout their
It's
grades?
certainly something that one of the high schools I work in, I'm not doing it at the moment, but where I have worked, we noticed that the children weren't understanding what they were reading, and really not just surface level understanding, but that deeper verbal reasoning, inferring. Like one of the important things, if you're reading a story, how did this character feel at this point in time? How do you know that? Because of what they say, what the author has the person doing, what's happening to them, then I get to know this character is feeling really happy or sad or desperate or frightened. And if you don't understand that's what's going on, then you don't get if I'm not putting myself into the role of the character, I probably don't enjoy it as much.
Yeah.
But what I tend to do is put myself into the role of the character so much that if bad things are happening to the character, I go away feeling really sad. I go to sleep feeling sad, because I have totally understood it and I'm empathizing with the character so much that I enjoy the story so much more. And so I want to read more. And so if it's just their focus has been on learning how to say the words, and it's like the school I was in yesterday, the teachers told me that the psychologist who came to the school decided that lots of the children were dyslexic. And I thought, well, that's really strange. I've listened to them read and I watched them write, and I wouldn't say that. What sort of assessment has the psychologist used? Did the psychologist listen to them read or look at their writing? No. Well, what do you mean? He said they were dyslexic. And do you know what the answer was going to be to help them? Oh, they must need more phonics programs. And it might have been, they're not reading because they're not enjoying what they read, because they haven't been taught how to comprehend, which is what's going to give you your satisfaction when you read that makes you want to read more often.
Yep.
Look, it might even be that they were told what they had to read instead of being allowed to choose.
Yep.
It might have been that there wasn't a lot of access to a lot of books in the room. And I know one of the children I pick up from school on a weekly basis, and I look at her room and there are no books. And I think, what in the world's going on in that classroom? You've got to have, for motivation, you have to have a lot of accessibility to really good reading material. You have to have free choice, guided definitely by the teacher. And a lot of opportunity to do it. And, sometimes it's doing it in a place where you really enjoy doing it too. Some kids get distracted by what's going on in the room, so perhaps they want to sit outside or something. I'd be looking at why they're not enjoying reading,
and perhaps,
with all of these other things really taken into account, rather than just, and I would look at what the teaching has been.
And perhaps the listening comprehension has been developed through read aloud as they get into the older grades as well. I remember being in New York and reading to a Year 8 class and, read aloud to them, and they just loved it. It's just
Did you notice when you would read aloud in some of the classrooms there that when you finished the reading, the kids would clap?
Yes.
They weren't used to it, and they enjoyed it so much they would clap.
Yes.
And I'd think, oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I know.
But they thoroughly enjoyed it, no matter what the age.
The enjoyment was just unbelievable. Mind you, they love the Australian accent as well. So.
Of course. But, that's a time too when you can introduce them to fabulous authors that they will enjoy if they then have a chance to read books by that author, and authors with rich language and rich stories. Or it might be that they just want to read about sports because that's what they're really interested in. And if reading sports magazines is what's going to get them hooked on reading, great.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's wrong with reading sports magazines anyway? Particularly, they might be building up new vocabulary. They certainly have a lot of background knowledge to bring to it, so they'll enjoy it and understand it. So, we've got to be very careful about what we're doing and how that will affect what the kids then want to do. Certainly motivation to read. We don't want to lose it.
No, and I'll just point people to our Blessing the Book podcast by Sharon, where she goes through Linda Gambrell's work on motivation to read. So
yes, definitely.
Yep.
And just Google that name and read about what Linda Gambrell discovered about the importance of motivation in reading. It's why when I'm listing what are all of the things that we need to be dealing with in a reading curriculum, we include motivation because it has such an impact on everything about reading.
Yes.
And, particularly comprehension. Well, you know what? Motivation, if it makes them read more, they're going to get much better at all their word recognition skills as well, aren't they?
That's right.
So it's very important for everything. Fluency affects comprehension dramatically. And also, if you're not fluent, you don't understand as much. It's a very reciprocal aspect of what comprehension is about. And fluency, of course, isn't speed. Yes, it's to do with rate, but it's expression that's so important about fluency, how I read it and how it all hangs together, and the expression to do with the pace. Those two things will make a big difference. But I want to point out to everybody as well, too, that sometimes kids read so fast that they don't understand what they're reading. So fluency is not just let's read fast and let's test how fast they read, but it's, are they using the right pace depending on what they're reading, and the expression that they should be using depending on what they're reading and what the text means. And so how do you get better at fluency? You read often, and you reread and you reread often. So comprehension is helped in the fluency aspect so much by kids reading along with the teacher, making sure the teacher is very fluent as well with expression. And also in shared reading, of course, they're going to be reading along with, but they could also do readers' theatre, where there's a reason with just text. You don't have to have illustrations to go with it. Readers' theatre scripts, where a little group of kids will be taking on roles and practicing their reading, because they're then going to perform the reading aloud, perhaps to the class or another group of kids. So we mustn't forget how fluent a reader is will affect how much they understand what they're reading, if they've got the right expression and pace. And, the expression comes from taking notice of the punctuation in the text and the author's use of things like bold text. How are you supposed to say that? And, of course, I can be teaching that from the day kids start school, because if we're using shared reading material that's got some text bold or in different colours, or there's an exclamation mark, and we can be talking about what does that mean about how we have to say it.
Yeah.
And if you read it with the right sort of expression, then it's much easier to understand what's going on, what the author is trying to say in what they write. So don't forget to include the fluency aspect of comprehension.
And unfortunately, sometimes the type of testing that's going on in schools in fluency tests the rate of fluency.
I know.
And it's only one little aspect of, and it shouldn't be about the rate anyway.
No, it should not. And in fact, do you know the most proficient readers change the pace of what they're reading depending on what part of the text it is.
Yeah.
And they will even purposely slow down when they think, I'm not understanding this.
Yeah.
And that's one of the really important comprehension strategies, by the way, is to monitor your own comprehension, to understand when you're losing meaning, and to fix it up. And the fixing up might be, I need to go back and reread at a slower pace, thinking about what I'm reading while I'm reading instead of reading fast.
And it's
vital.
Even good speakers will slow down to change the meaning and change what their audience is understanding. They'll use speed, they'll use variation on volume and expression. And
exactly. And I hope that I've been doing that, because I'm conscious that if people are just listening, I need to do that.
Yeah, that's right.
So if I just went same tone, same pace, it's not going to work.
It just shows you that testing gears education sometimes in not the best directions.
You're being very kind, Phil, very understated. Sometimes it's absolutely devastating because it's going to give the type of information that is actually not good information, and therefore makes teachers do things that are not helpful but even unhelpful. So the last thing I want to say to children is you've got to read faster.
Yeah.
If they were reading like a robot and just reading like this, it's not actually the speed, it's the expression that needs to change.
Yeah.
And, reading along with a proficient reader that's using expression is a really good way to help them. So buddy reading with someone who's a reader who reads with expression would be really good. But certainly rereading, and rereading silently before you read out loud will help children to read with much more expression. Because when you're reading out loud, especially if someone's listening, then you become too conscious of saying the words instead of thinking about what you're reading and therefore how you might say it. So, just these little things again that we don't intend to do, but we do, and it can affect in not a good way.
Timothy Rosinski's got a wonderful fluency rubric which people can use to broaden their knowledge of fluency.
Absolutely. And again, if they Google Timothy Rosinski, he's a specialist work that he's really focused so much on is fluency. Anything he writes, there are podcasts that he's done, there are webcasts. And again, you can learn so much so easily about what fluency is really about and the sorts of things that you can do. And I think that we've even perhaps written a bit about this on previous podcasts or talked about it before, Phil. I'd be surprised
yes, I think so.
if we haven't.
Yep.
Yeah. Certainly, I think the podcast and all the things that, a foundation teacher needs to be thinking about in their teaching of literacy, we would have talked about that.
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
And we'll take a break there from part 2 of our podcast. We look forward to you joining us for part 3. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.